Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a pretty wild idea, one that completely flips the script on when the church actually began. What if its story is way, way older and more woven into history than we ever thought? Let's get into it.
All right, let's kick things off with a question that really challenges a core belief for a lot of people. We're all taught that the Christian church kicked off at Pentecost, right? After Jesus' resurrection. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if that's just chapter 4 of the story?
Yeah, you heard that right. What if the church didn't start with a crowd of disciples in Jerusalem, but with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? Think about that for a second. The idea here is that God's plan for our rescued people, for a church, was in motion from the absolute beginning.
So where does this idea even come from? Well, a key piece of evidence presented is this verse from 1 Peter. And the logic is pretty straightforward, really. If the good news, the gospel, was preached to people who died before Jesus even walked the earth, well, that means God's rescue plan wasn't some kind of plan B. It was always in effect, reaching all the way back in time.
Okay, but you're probably thinking, that's a huge claim. Where's the proof? And according to the source material we're looking at, the key to this whole thing has been hiding in plain sight in one of the most mysterious books of the Bible, Revelation.
Now, the book of Revelation is full of symbols, right? Dragons, beasts, all kinds of wild stuff that people have debated for centuries. But the argument here hinges on a rare moment where we don't have to guess. Jesus himself steps in and straight up defines his own symbols. He gives us the answer key.
And here it is. The 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. It's not like the 7 churches or a symbol for them. He says they are them. This one little sentence, according to this view, is the key that unlocks this entire historical map. It's the linchpin for everything that follows.
So what are these 7 lampstands? Well, together they form a menorah. And this isn't just some random piece of furniture. The menorah is a hugely significant symbol from the ancient Jewish temple. It represents God's light, his presence, and a sense of divine order and even sacred time.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about the lampstands themselves. The source we're examining points to one tiny but crucial detail. Where is Jesus standing? Because his position changes, well, it changes everything.
He's in the midst of them. Think about that. He's not at the start of the line lighting the first one. He's not at the end. He's smack dab in the middle of the whole sequence. This implies the churches don't begin with him. He shows up in the middle of their ongoing story.
So, let's put it together. If these 7 lamps on the menorah are like a timeline, 7 great ages of history, and Jesus is standing in the midst, where does that put him? Right at lamp number 4, the exact center. 3 lamps came before him, and 3 come after. Suddenly, he's not the starting point of the church, he's the central pivot point for all of history.
And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the way we usually think about it. The church begins after Jesus. But on the right, this menorah map idea suggests something totally different, that the church existed before Jesus' incarnation and continues after, with him showing up right in the middle of its timeline.
So, if we run with this idea, what does it mean for, well, everything? The implications are huge. It basically forces us to remap our entire understanding of history, especially the Old Testament. It's just simple math, right? If lamp number 4 is Jesus, then lamps 1, 2, and 3 have to be the historical ages that came before him. This reframes the whole Old Testament. The stories of Adam, Abraham, Moses, they're no longer just a backstory. They become the first 3 stages of the church itself.
And the source material argues the clues are right there in the text. Take the first church, Ephesus. What does Jesus say to them? He critiques them for leaving their first love, and he promises them access to the tree of life. Now, who lost their first love for God and got kicked out of a garden with the tree of life? It maps perfectly onto Adam and the story of Eden.
And this pattern continues. The second church, Smyrna, which was known for its suffering and persecution, is lined up with the Abrahamic age. Think of Abraham's tests of faith. Then you've got Pergamum, which was warned about compromising with Satan's throne, worldly power, and that's mapped onto the age of Moses in the kingdom of Israel, a time defined by the struggle between following God and giving in to the temptations of empire and idolatry.
Okay, let's zoom out for a second. Why does any of this matter? Is it just a neat theory? Well, according to this perspective, it's about seeing the big picture, the sheer scale and consistency of God's plan. This reinterpretation really leans into verses like this one from Ephesians. It suggests that salvation wasn't a last-minute fix.
It was a single, unbroken story that unifies the Old and New Testaments. It paints a picture of a plan that existed, in a sense, before the world was even made, and has been unfolding ever since.
So here you have it, the complete map. Christ isn't the beginning, he's the center. He's the hinge that connects the ancient past, the ages of Eden, Abraham, and Moses, with the future. And according to this map, the ages that follow him are defined by things like institutional decay, the witness of a faithful few, and eventually, a final test for the church.
And this brings us to a really challenging final thought. The last church on this map, Laodicea, which would represent the final age, it's not criticized for being persecuted or poor. It's criticized for being rich, comfortable, lukewarm, and self-sufficient, for thinking, I have need of nothing. And that leaves us with a pretty pointed question, doesn't it? If that lamp represents an age of prosperity, could it be that our greatest danger isn't hardship, but becoming so comfortable that we think we don't need God at all? Something to think about.